So the college football world is at a crossroads, and and so there's two. So Texas and Oklahoma joined the SEC.
Whoa,
They
whoa,
they
whoa.
made an announcement that they're going to join the SEC.
No,
What's
no,
up?
no. Just the story came out saying that they were having talks to do so.
Oh, it's already there was like another story that came out like on Thursday or Friday that they're just they're it's basically done.
They haven't
Like
formally announced anything. They're planning to do it tomorrow, according to sources.
right, but like they say it's basically done. Like 11 of the 14 you need 11 teams. 11 teams have agreed.
No, they
I,
haven't voted yet. They haven't
no, I know,
formally.
but like no, I know, but it's like it's gonna be done. They
Unless Woj or Schefter says it, I'm not gonna. I don't
well,
think it is.
I'll say it. It's basically done.
Yeah.
But okay, but you can hold on tight.
Well,
But
I'm just gonna say this before you start. There was an article that came out at 5:25 today, 3 hours ago, till we're recording this, that says there's a slim possibility that SEC isn't the final destination for Texas.
yeah,
That's on
so
ESPN.com's front page.
got it. But so I would say the one thing before we go in, the only thing I would say to that is that's because the Big 12's offering them a deal where they would get more money on the TV rights. And I was on the Athletic. It mentioned that
Man,
that it's just the SEC. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma are just like tell them to kick rocks. So but I mean, it's basically a done deal. We'll just say it's basically a done deal. So we stop arguing about like the semantics of it of the
agree to
before
disagree.
before we get into it. Okay, so um, one of the like obviously the reason that Texas and Oklahoma are joining the SEC is because of money first and then prestige second. And so my question now, and I think it's like a question of where college football is going to be. The question is like, is now are they going to go from a Power Four conference? Are we going to do a Power Four conference, or is there going to be three power conferences? Is it going to be a Power Three or a Power Four? And so and like all big institutional reforms, you follow the cheddar, baby. You follow that cash flow, as Rich Dad Poor Dad told me, cash flow. That's what it's all about. And I think when you look at this and you're trying to figure out if it's going to be three or if it's going to be four, I think it ends up being four just from the point of the Big 10 already has 14 teams. The SEC is going to have 16 teams with Texas and Oklahoma, and the ACC has 15 teams. So you have those teams right now. So unless the Big 12 just like completely dies, which is probably not going to happen, without at least two or three teams jumping and abandoning ship, once the Big 10 takes a few teams, whoever they're going to go after, it could be UCLA, could be USC, could be Oregon. I believe Kansas is definitely going to be on that list just from a basketball perspective. Could be Oklahoma State because they're the third team that makes the most money in terms of like football revenue. Once that gets all put into its area, you're looking at like what happens to the Pac-12, what happens with them. Are they going to add two more teams? Are they going to chill? Are they just going to be the Pac-12, or are they going to just end up dying because they don't want to take on more teams? I don't think I think there's going to be four power conferences that end up staying. I think the Big 12 is just going to die, and then it's going to be the Pac-14 or the Pac-15, maybe even the Pac-16, which is a lot. I don't even think that the Pac-12
Yeah.
I don't even think the Pac-12 is going to, because when you look at all the teams, like the only team that the Pac-12 would really want out of all those, besides Texas and Oklahoma, is Texas Tech. Like that's really it. And
Well, then
even then, that's
they
just
kind of screw
football.
themselves in terms of like regional name, like right, like then you're not really the Pac whatever because you're taking the middle of Lubbock, Texas. It's just like
I get what you're saying, but like the regions kind of don't matter at this point. Like they don't, because Texas was gonna go to the Pac-12 in 10 years ago.
there was a rumor, yeah.
They were trying
Back
to,
in
and
the
then
day,
they were
yeah.
like, "Nah, we're gonna stay here." And so I don't even think regions matter because like the Big 10 is 13, is what 13, 14 teams.
Yeah,
Big 10 has 14 teams, and they're like, "Yeah, we're the Big 10 still."
yeah.
Like it just doesn't matter. And the Big 10's going to try to get, and I get what you're saying because they call themselves the Pacific,
Yeah.
that it's just
Well,
like
there
your
was also that thing
regional.
that I was mentioning on, through our very long text chain
It was so
uh,
funny. I just kept thinking
about all of
about.
this.
So John and I got in like a disagreement on Twitter about this whole thing, and the whole time I just kept thinking about this random dude who was like, "What the fuck." Like every time it was just like another thing and another thing. Just like these two fucking bozos keep arguing about fucking Notre Dame and whatever the fuck, and this is about UCLA.
Of course, it's about UCLA with you, right? But no, to
Well,
my
no, I'm
point.
saying the guy is like a blog
Oh
writer
yeah,
for
oh yeah.
UCLA.
We were just
Yeah, he was like, I just did this
continuing.
about UCLA. What the fucking talking about
Yeah,
Notre Dame?
no, my point with the Pac-10 or Pac-12 or whatever they aspire to be, it's all about media markets, right? Like you don't grab
Sure.
Texas Tech unless you want that media market. No one wants the Lubbock media market. That's why Texas is so well valued because it's Austin. You're the center. You're the state capital of Texas, right? And so obviously they have their own goddamn network, which is why the SEC wanted them. But you wanted to drag Oklahoma into it because that's the team that's actually fairly decent and has a pretty good reputation the last 25 years as being a solid program. Now with the Pac-10, I mean, to your point, like who would they want to grab that like is actually a good program with a good media market? Like all those teams are kind of taken. Maybe like they go to the Mountain West and grab like Nevada or UNLV, someone like that. Try to grab the Vegas market, which kind of makes sense because they're somewhat decent of an athletic program. The media market's growing with Vegas growing. Those are the only two teams I would think that they would grab on the West Coast, somewhat nearby, wouldn't have to force all their other programs to kind of travel to play them. And it's Vegas, right? It's like the center hold of USA basketball right now. Like I said, it's growing. It's got the Raiders, so they got a stadium there to use. Those are the only ones that make sense to me. And then going back to our text chain or whatever it was, a text chain / Twitter
Twitter thread.
thread. Thank you. Is my point was with the Big 10 is they could expand to the West Coast if they feel that the Pac-10 or 12 or whatever the fuck they want to call themselves is kind of faltering or falling apart. Go grab those teams on the West Coast and grab that media market. They already play at the Rose Bowl, right? And so fans already know of the Big 10. And now if you were to grab USC, UCLA, Washington, and like maybe Cal or Stanford, that's a pretty strong hold on the West Coast for the Big 10. You go from the New York market down to LA. That's a big media footprint, I think, for them.
So I want all of that to happen because I just think it would be sick, like to have Ohio State. Like I'm full. Like I want. Originally, I was afraid that the Pac-12 or the whatever it's going to be called would just like fall through the wayside and just like because I'm part of or because I'm quote unquote I'm a fandom of that conference
Yeah.
technically. Like and just looking at it all and thinking about it, like I just don't give a fuck. Like I prefer that the Big Ten takes UCLA and USC. The issue is like remember they have 14 teams, so all those teams that you mentioned that makes it 20 teams.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying initially. Like if that happens, is SEC content with just 16 teams, which I think they would be with just those 16 teams? Is the ACC content with those 15 teams? It becomes like another thing, but like the Pac-12 doesn't want to just die. So it's like, well, we may not want Texas Tech, so we'll have to, but we'll have to, we're going to have to absorb teams to be bigger and to have a competitive a base of teams.
Yeah.
So, and then you mentioned that Oklahoma and Texas, the Longhorn Network is done after this deal, and Oklahoma
it's going to be swallowed up into the SEC deal if this.
The reason that you take Oklahoma and Texas also is because like collectively they make without the TV rights. Like I did the math on this. Shout out to me. Shout out to B who did the math on this. $303 million collectively. Texas makes $223 million in revenue, and
not TV related, just in general.
No, 223 with the TV deal,
Everything.
with everything. But you're only talking about when you're talking about money from the Big 12, you're talking about $27 million, like $27, $32 million. Like the TV rights deals are lucrative for the Big Ten, and they're decent for the SEC, who made 45 million this last year, which is what I was trying to tell you on Twitter, which is like if they come like if this comes together, or when it comes together, these teams are going to be making, without Texas and Oklahoma. It was reported that from the AP.
Yeah, that's the one I sent you, where they signed a deal with ESPN, the SEC. They're making 300.
Yeah. So
per year.
Yeah, and so I was confused by the math you threw at me the in the first one, because you were like, you're going to make 18 million. I just didn't understand that.
Yeah. So if you divide 300 million by 16 teams, it's 18.75 or something.
Yeah,
and the reason I was throwing that out there, because ESPN is not going to rip up the deal they just signed last year, and because they're not going to be allowed to show Oklahoma or Texas on that ESPN package, because the Big 12 still owns Oklahoma and Texas media rights for the
till 2024. Now the
25.
SEC deal 25. Well, see, that's when we'll talk about all that. So it doesn't, like, the TV rights don't just like work. Like, they're going to be making 68 million without. That's like established. Like, its annual distribution to its members is about to be about $68 million per teams without Oklahoma or Texas. When you add those two teams, who collectively bring in $300 million, and then you change like, even if ESPN was like, we don't want to renegotiate with you, like, the SEC is you can figure out a way to get out of like Maryland got out of their contract and went to the Big Ten.
I would
Texas.
agree with...
Hold on. Let me just finish this point. Literally, Texas and Oklahoma are trying to get out of their deal as early as 2023. They have to give them an 18-month notice, which they are. So the earliest they can get out is 2023, pay $75 million a piece, and then they can leave by 2024 when the ESPN deal takes place. So if that has to happen, so that will happen, so that ESPN, so SEC can be like, we're going to renegotiate because we're now bringing you $300 million in revenue without those TV media rights deals. So you're going to have a conversation with us. So then you were looking at $80 to $100 million a team. That's why they do this deal on top of the prestige. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that there's no way the Big 12 just relents. They have them by the balls till 2025, right?
They don't, though.
That's everything that's being reported. Big 12 owns Texas and Oklahoma's first and second tier media rights for football and men's basketball until June 30th, 2025. And I understand contracts can be broken. They can be paid. Or
law
whatever.
Firms.
But
good ones.
Well, obviously with Texas, I mean, they have
that's what I'm saying.
Lawyers up the ass. But Big 12's not going to just be like, hey, here's our lifeblood. Go ahead and take it. Like, they know, like what we were just discussing, they might fall apart without these two teams. These are the cash cows, as you just mentioned with the 300 million or whatever. They're not going to just like say, "Hey, have fun. Here's your walking papers. Have at it." There's no way they're just going to let this happen without, putting in a good fight.
Well, that's what I don't think they're not going to fight. They have to fight because Oklahoma State is already talking to the Big Ten. The Big Ten is talking to Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State. The Big Ten's talking around. So if these teams start freaking and panicking and jumping ship before everything can get squared away, it's done anyways. But I will say, the Big 12 has to fight. Like, they're obviously going to fight, but at the same time, if they give them 18 months. Right, the earliest is 2023. So if it's in Texas and Oklahoma, I keep forgetting Oklahoma. I don't know why I keep forgetting Oklahoma as like a word, but Texas and Oklahoma are willing to wait out their contract. And if that's the case, then there won't be maybe a renegotiation, or maybe the SEC will go, well, there's still going to be a renegotiation because of the money we're bringing in. So
the leaving part that you're mentioning, the 18-month window, that's just to leave to another conference. The 18-month window.
That's not to announce
the media part of it.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but you still have to, like, if you buy out that portion, you're paying for, like, if they both pay $75 million, what is that, $145 million? Yeah. So they're paying $145 million on top of announcing that 18-month window that they're willing to do that. But if through litigation, they're going to try to obviously make it cheaper. And if they can't come to a conclusion, Texas and Oklahoma are willing to wait out the contract. But even when it all, like, SEC is still just not going to be like, we agreed to this. This is okay. These motherfuckers are dangerous, dude. They're there for a reason. They're killers.
Yeah.
There's no way. What's the fucking guy who runs the SEC and basically all of college football now? Gary McKinney or whatever his name is. That motherfucker. Yeah. He's not gonna just go to ESPN and say, all right, we'll just all take. They know what they're bringing to the table with those two teams.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we'll see what happens. For one,
hopefully they can negotiate something, because I mean, as of right now, June 30th, 2025 is the last date on that deal.
Yeah.
The media rights availability for Oklahoma, Texas, for the Big 12. Now, if they can't agree on something, Big 12 is going to walk away from the table and say, pay us their money to leave, and we got you till you got your balls till that date.
Well, yeah, but if they pay him out, if they buy him out, then they don't have him by the balls, because once they're bought out.
No, so that's what they owe if they were to leave early, the conference early, not for the media. That's what I'm saying.
Wait, say that again.
So the money to pay early is not for
is to just leave the conference.
The conference. It's not for the media. So that's what's the big linchpin on all of this, is they can determine a severance, but it's separate of the 75 per school to leave.
But the media deal is with the network. That's what's so confusing then. So if they leave, I'm saying the media deals with the conference. So if they're no longer part of that conference, they don't have rights. They have rights to the team that's playing in that conference, not Texas or Oklahoma. If Texas and Oklahoma buy out and they're no longer part of the conference, then they don't have rights to their, unless they made a separate TV regional
they deal. Do. That's why the Longhorn Network is the Longhorn Network.
But isn't that a part of ESPN?
Yeah, that's why the SEC wants to do this.
No, I mean, there's money, but what I'm saying is, so then what's the issue with Texas? Like, the issue then lies with Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, that's where that's where people. Well, I mean, obviously Oklahoma doesn't have their own network, but like I mentioned earlier, they're the talent. They're the ones that SEC really wants. Texas is just the moneymaker that you're stealing money from, because you don't give a fuck. You're going to roll over them no matter what, whoever plays them. Because no one is afraid of UT, right? Like, no one gives a shit.
They're not even afraid of Oklahoma.
What's that?
They're not even afraid of Oklahoma, even though they should be this year. If the Oklahoma was joining the SEC this year, they would be.
So that's another conversation, because that's gonna. I mean, now you're looking at recruits and you're like, we want to play in the SEC and not leave home. What's the flower bed of talent in college football? It's Texas, right?
Yeah.
So
Texas and California, but they're all going to the SEC anyways. Bryce Young is from California. Tua Tagovailoa was from. JT Daniels is from California. Tua Tagovailoa was from Hawaii. Mac Jones was the oddity from Alabama.
That's what I'm saying, is like, come play in the SEC but not leave your state.
Oh, you mean with no, Texas is going to get better recruits for sure. For sure, Texas is going to get better recruits. It's just a win-win for all these conferences. Oklahoma is going to get more prestige, and that's the thing, and which is going to lead to Notre Dame, right? Let's get into Notre Dame. Do we have anything more we want to talk about in terms of
for the Texas thing? I was going to say, poor Texas A&M. They
right. Shout out to the Aggies.
They wanted to leave the shadow of Texas for decades, and finally we're able to. And we're like, oh, we're in a better place. We got Johnny Manziel. We're in a better conference, and we're competing against Alabama now on national stage, a primetime game on CBS. And 6 years later, however long it's been, 5 years later, hey, we're back.
And you're the Clippers again. And that sucks.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were number 5 in the nation last year.
Yeah.
They have Jimbo Fisher. Kellen Mond balled out. To other people's eyes, to some people's eyes, he didn't. But that's for another conversation, another time. That was just a joke. John hates Kellen Mond.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. But I want to so what happens to Notre Dame? If anything happens to Notre Dame, now this is where another I don't even know if it was disagreement. I guess I was just saying it's a possibility. And I know people say it's not a possibility.
You were talking so far into the future about super conferences that it wasn't even like It's kind of pointless to have that conversation.
Well, what happened was we were talking about like 3 different things at the same time.
Well, you started off with Iowa State, and so I was like, okay, so that's the conversation he wants to have. And then somewhere along the line, you just started with super conferences.
Because you were like, they're coming for everything. And I was like, oh, super team, super league. And then so I just went into that. Because I was like, oh, they're coming for everything. He's talking about a super league. And so that's where I looked at it from that. And that's why I was so confused. I was like, what is this disagreement?
No, but you were saying that Notre Dame is going to be leveraged into joining a conference for money. And I was disagreeing with that because they already make so much money on their own. Why would they
make $20 million? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Excuse me.
I was just saying, why would they need, or why would they feel pressured into having to join a conference and then sharing a money? Like it wouldn't make any sense to me.
Because
based on the current money being thrown around now.
Because based on the current money that's being thrown around now, Minnesota makes more money than they do annually on media rights. Minnesota made $55 million, $45 million, one of those, 45 or 55.
From
in between
Fox
that,
Sports?
From Big 10. That's what I'm telling you. That's what I'm saying. Like $68 million, $80 million is a reasonable number. That's what I'm trying to explain. Like annually, from the ACC, Notre Dame gets $6 million. ACC makes the least money out of all of them. They get like 25 to like 32. Clemson gets 32. So they get, from media alone, 15 million from NBC, which you mentioned. They get 15 million, and then they get 6 million from ACC.
Yeah.
And then after that, they generate a gazillion dollars on their own, right?
I think that's why they've never felt pressured to move into a conference.
Exactly. But now Minnesota's making $45 million a year. That's what I'm trying to say. Just looking at everybody get a piece of the pie, as like Minnesota should not be making as much. Minnesota made $140 million last year.
I don't know where you're getting those numbers from, but it's a lot.
USA Today, NCAA finances. Okay. So Notre Dame's not on this list just because they're a private institution, but hold on. Notre Dame is like 7, or no, Notre Dame is 7 on the list when you add like private institutions, right? So they're still making a lot, but if they add these media, if they add, for example, Big 10 money down the line, you're talking about them getting close to $200 million. Texas makes 223. Texas A&M, 212. Ohio State, 210. Michigan, 197. Take away $45 million from Michigan's pie. So, do you know what I mean?
I agree with your point. There might be more money to leave or join whatever they want, but it takes away the kind of like magic or allure.
What's it called?
Like,
the
whatever that, yeah.
The je ne sais quoi?
There you go. That je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi.
I would kind of relate it to like a Ferrari, right? Like Ferraris aren't built in. They're not built in like auto plants, right? They're built by hand, and that's why they're glorified everywhere around the world. I feel like that's the same with Notre Dame. I feel like they would kind of cheapen the brand a little bit.
I kind of agree with that.
When you
agree with that.
When you slap on like let's go Big 10.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel, and like obviously like look at their uniforms. They're plain
beautiful,
blue, golden,
stunning.
Helmet. And then you got your Irish guy, and it's just like I don't see that happening for that reason.
Well, and once again, like our conversation, because Twitter only has 140 characters, and like this podcast isn't just about a fucking disagreement that John and I had on Twitter, but it's like part of we had this conversation recently, but because there's only 140 characters, it's like you can only fit in so much. And I'm watching Ted Lasso, and I'm fucking, you know what I mean? I'm chilling at like 10 o'clock at night or whatever the fuck. but ultimately, my point is like it's a possibility. Like everyone says, it's just not going to happen. And personally, I prefer Notre Dame to stay independent. I would love for, like you said, it's the je ne sais quoi. I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying, je ne sais quoi. But it's like what makes Notre Dame cool is that they are they're independent, and it's like it's a saying amongst the Notre Dame fan base. It's like the 2 most important things to Notre Dame are, depending on the year, is Catholicism and independency. So but ultimately, like I said, because money has been the whole reason for all of this happening. If you add more, like, I understand Notre Dame's point, which is like, if we go in there,
Yeah.
people are gonna piggyback off of us. Like, we're gonna bring in $70 million on our own, or like we're gonna bring in $100 million based on our own valuation to the Big Ten. So why should we? You know what I mean? I get your point.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, it seems that like there is a greater money to be had, and if money starts getting to the point, like, it's not out of the realm of the possibility that Oklahoma, Texas, Mississippi State, it's not out of the realm of the possibility that fucking Mississippi State, shout out to national champions, are making $80 million in TV rights alone. And I think that may perk up the Notre Dame, brass, and they may think, why is Mississippi State making way more money than we're making? Because the Notre Dame deal isn't over till what, 2036?
Yeah.
So by 2027, by 2028, when those deals start moving, and Notre Dame still getting, maybe they'll renegotiate and get 30 million, or, you know what I mean? It'll be interesting to see.
I do have one last point on this where,
Mhm.
like I've always mentioned on this show, I listen to Dallas radio still just because, grew up there. All my teams are there except for the Dodgers. But one of the points one of the broadcasters made was that he was sad for the Big 12 that this was happening, because it might be the end of the Big 12, and they're so Texas focused in terms of all their programs and whatnot. It's going to suck, because if this is the beginning of the end for the Big 12, no longer can you go to your supermarket and see somewhere Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, or Texas A&M, or Texas Tech, or Texas, or Baylor, TCU. All those schools are so close together that he was saying that he really enjoys like the friendly banter that you see on Saturdays in the fall, where it's just like, hey, your buddy went to Kansas. Oh, your other friend went to Kansas State. That's cool. Like, you guys are playing against each other. Or Oklahoma State, or whatever it may be. That whole region is so close to each other, so tightly knit, that and they're so football crazy out there. And, sports crazy in general, but football more than anything, obviously. But it's gonna suck if that is what this is kind of the beginning of the end of that conference, and all those programs are ripped apart, and one goes to the Pac-12, one goes to the SEC, one goes to the ACC, one goes to the Big 10 or Mountain West, or whatever you may, or Conference USA. It's gonna suck, and I do feel bad for those smaller programs. So I am excited to see Texas and Oklahoma move on, if they actually do, as like I said, they're expected to do tomorrow. But it does suck for what I thought was a great conference already. And I honestly didn't think they really needed to make any tweaks. But I mean, they pretty much put the nail in the coffin in terms of what's going on. So that's all I just wanted to say on that point before moving on.
I think I definitely agree with what you're saying. It's one of those things where, like, so much of college football growing up, or so much of college football's history, is regional, until like we got to this point where, you know, they were just making so much money that they needed to make a national championship and figure it the fuck out before they just to vote on one. Now, then they created the BCS championship game and the bowl season, and so much of it has been a money grab because people love college football. But there's something, like, initially that's why I didn't want the Pac-12 to die, just because UCLA plays out of there, and it's one of those things.
I was gonna say I would compare it to the Big East falling apart in terms of basketball a couple of years ago.
Very sad.
Where it was like, man, that Big East tournament at the end of the year, right before the NCAA tournament, was like super fucking exciting, and the quality of talent in the Big East was great. And then like half of it went to the ACC over like 2 years, and it was just like, man. And now it's not as it doesn't have that spice to it. It doesn't have the word that you were trying to say, that whatever.
Je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi. There you go. It doesn't have that life to it that we really enjoyed. I mean, I remember watching Kemba Walker take over the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden back in the day, and it's just like, yo, this guy's played like 16 quarters in 2 days. Like there's just no way this guy's doing it right now or whatever. But it's just sad.
It is. It's one of those things where money really does. It's like money is killing, like it's just too much money's to be had.
Yeah.
Where it's just like it's fucking everybody shit over, and that's one of the best things about sports is that it's regional, and like you said, running into like whenever I see somebody, when it's UCLA, USC. Whenever I see somebody wearing a USC shit, well, in general, whenever I see anybody wearing USC shit, I'm like, you fucking part of the red evil army, dude. Like you're one of the bad guys.
Have a piece of this lead, bro.
but after I thought about it and was like, oh, imagine UCLA, Ohio State coming over to the Rose Bowl and running a train on UCLA. It would suck. Yeah. It would suck, but I would be there and I'd be like, fuck, man, they're so much better than us.